Hey guys, Jay here. If improving your music and audio is your passion, then consider subscribing. Now, if you've been watching my videos for a while now, then you know I'm a big fan of tube amplifiers. And so what we have here today is the Line Magnetic 805IA tube integrated. Mr. Editor, sorry, that's the Willsenton. Can we show the Line Magnetic, please? Sorry about that. So anyways, what we have here today is the Line Magnetic LM-805IA tube integrated amplifier. And as you can see, the similarities between the Willsenton and the Line Magnetic is pretty scary. They look almost identical. But there are key differences here to note. One of them being that the Line Magnetic is almost double the price of the Willsenton when bought legitimately. Now, I emphasize legitimately, and I want you to hear this very carefully because it's very important. If you were to buy this, the pricing is all over the place. Like it is, 3,000 somewhere and it's 5,000 somewhere. But the actual MSRP, the actual listed price is 5,000 USD. And if you were to buy legitimately, that is approximately what you would pay, around 5,000 USD. Now, there are counterfeits, and Line Magnetic makes this aware on their website as well. And even if it's not counterfeits and you get it for a good pricing, that means you don't get servicing, you don't get warranty. Line Magnetic does not consider it as one of its own. So you might want to check if your seller is an authorized seller. And I emphasize authorized because some sellers are not, and those you don't get any warranty or servicing or any authentication of it being the real thing. Even ChinaHiFiAudio.com, who are the authorized dealers for the Willsenton, isn't authorized to sell the correct voltage for North America. So if you're someone that's going to be buying this and taking a risk, buying it from a non-authorized seller, then at least make sure that it's the correct voltage or you're gonna be screwed. This unit right here that I have is actually a unit that one of my Patreons bought and sent it over to me to review. It is also worth mentioning that this unit also has upgraded Mundorf capacitors. The Line Magnetic already does come with Mundorf capacitors, but he upgraded to a higher quality Mundorf capacitors, which costed him an extra $500 in CAD, Canadian dollars, according to him. Now, Willsenton R800i is going to be just under $2,000 on ChinaHiFiAudio.com before shipping. And they are the authorized reseller for the export version, so I recommend you buy from them and not on AliExpress or anywhere else because you're not getting the export version and you're not guaranteed that. I believe ChinaHiFiAudio.com is the only authorized dealer that can sell you the export version that has the upgrades. But keep in mind that that's going to be before shipping. Shipping is going to be expensive on both units because these are just big amplifiers weighing about 100 pounds each. So shipping is going to be expensive, but after buying it legitimately and after shipping it and all that, the Willsenton is going to be approximately half the price of the Line Magnetic. The Line Magnetic is going to be about double the price of the Willsenton. So the question is the Line Magnetic worth double the price? And I'm not going to waste your time. I'm going to answer it right now. I just don't think that the Line Magnetic is worth double the price with the differences that I see, at least in my books. But there is further explanation needed for that. There are way more similarities than differences, but those differences can mean big things to you as the user. Starting out with the similarities, both are made in China. Both manufacturer listed output is 48 watts per channel in Class A. Both use 300B as drivers and 805 tubes as their output or power stages. Both have the same bias and hum adjustment. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go check out my Willsenton R800i review. I go into the details of adjusting it, and you can find it in the link description below this video. Now continuing on, both have 4, 8, and 16 ohm speaker tabs. Both have pre-in sections on the back, which allows both units to be used as just an amplifier. In case you want to use your own preamplifier, you can connect it to this input right here called the pre-in. Oh, and they pretty much have the identical remote control. In terms of differences, obviously Willsenton has a blue meter while the Line Magnetic glows orange, and both can be turned off. They are going to use slightly different tubes in its input stages other than the 6S and 7. Those are the same. Personally, I like the tube choices on the Willsenton slightly better because it's using quieter tubes that last a longer time, like the 12AX7 in its input stages. Also, if you see the layout of the tubes, the Willsenton is all centered, but the line magnetic is kind of a little to the one side. And that bothers me with my OCD, but some people, may not be bothered by that. It really depends on who you are. But those are just little differences. There are bigger differences to discuss. For instance, the Willsenton has RCA and a true balanced input, while the line magnetic only has RCA. So this means that not only can you run longer cables if you have a balanced DAC or a balanced preamplifier, but also it could be beneficial for sound quality choices as well if you have a balanced DAC or a balanced preamplifier. For example, Kitsune DAC and the Serene preamp I have in my system right now. Then this is a big plus, and can be a reason why you would choose the Willsenton over the line magnetic. Now in terms of the build quality, I think the Willsenton has overall a better construction than the line magnetic in terms of finish and so on. But the line magnetic has a little bit of an upper hand in terms of the internal design. In terms of the internal components, they have a little bit of a higher quality Mondorf capacitor inside than the Willsenton. And also, you can clearly see that the filtering capacitors, they have way more in the power supply section. But also, Willsenton uses a toroidal transformer, which is a quieter solution, and that can't be ignored as well. Both have impressive build quality, but Willsenton does have a nicer finish and build quality, including the high quality metal construction on the speaker binding post as opposed to the standard plastic ones on the line magnetic. The knobs and switches on the front plate is about the same quality, with it all being metal and great quality on both, but slight edge to the Willsenton for a slightly more premium feel of the knob. And also, I just found the overall black finish to be better aesthetically than the line magnetic that has like a metal look. The line magnetic front panel does work slightly differently though. It has a button for power instead of a knob on the Willsenton. And it has a clear written indication of the inputs you are in instead of the A, B, C, D, E indication on the Willsenton. And the way line magnetic does it is obviously a better solution here and the better way to do it, because you don't have to look at the back of the unit to make sure that you're in the correct input. You can clearly see it in the front panel. Other than that, I think I pretty much covered most of the similarities and differences unless I missed anything. Now in terms of sound, the speakers that I used were the same Tecton 2-10 as I tested in the Willsenton. The Triangle Comet 40th anniversary version that I just reviewed for Soundstage magazine, link in the description. BMW 606 S2 anniversary that I just finished reviewing, and the ELAC Unify reference bookshelves. I chose the Kitsune DAC, which is a R2R DAC. That's their top of the line DAC, which was being fed through my Inuit Zen Mini Mark III as just a streamer without using its internal DAC because I'm using the Kitsune. And so the Zen Mini Mark III to the Kitsune via USB, and from the Kitsune to the line magnetic via RCA. Now I wish I had a balanced input on the line magnetic like I did with the Willsenton here, because the DAC is a balanced DAC and it would have been beneficial to have a balanced input, but we don't have that here on the line magnetic. So the other thing is that this combination does sound incredibly good. I mean, really, really good. The sound quality is extremely good. It's very smooth. It meets my preference. At no times is it bright. And honestly speaking, the system is so good that I've had systems that cost 3 to 5 times more. And I'm talking about like R2R and tube amplifier combinations. And this combination gets about 90 to 95% there in terms of smoothness, resolution, and just overall musicality. And let's not kid ourselves here. Let's be clear. The Kitsune is not an inexpensive solution or anything like that. It is a $5,000 DAC and it is their flagship. But I made sure that my front end is not the bottleneck because I didn't want that to be the bottleneck when I'm testing an amplifier like the line magnetic. And my job is to test right now the line magnetic. But for those of you that were wondering what it sounds like and how it performs when it is connected to a DAC that is, let's say, more sensible, I also use the new SMSL VMV D1 SE DAC, which is a DAC that costs about 720 USD. And it still sounded great. Honestly speaking, the smoothness was still there, the soundstage was still there. The only thing that was different was the resolution was a little bit pulled back. The finesse wasn't as much there. And the little micro details were a little bit more scattered compared to connecting it to something like the DAC. Depending on the speaker you're using, you may even actually prefer that, depending on taste, of course. But on the other hand, if you connect it to something like the B&W 606 S2 Anniversary Edition that I just reviewed, that speaker, a little bit of more refinement on the top end goes a long way. A little bit more resolution, a little bit more smoothness goes a long way. So connecting it to something like the SMSL was a little bit more devastating, meaning it didn't sound bad, but more apparently worse than the DAC than with other speakers. But both sounded great. And still, the Line Magnetic was my favorite pairing with the 606 S2 Anniversary Edition. But don't get me wrong, by far, the easier to drive speakers like the Triangle and the Tecton sounded the best with the Line Magnetic. So speakers that are easier to drive, more sensitive, did sound the best with the Line Magnetic. How did it sound better, you may ask? Well, it sounded more dynamic, but also more holographic and three-dimensional. What the Line Magnetic is good at, it was just more apparently shown on more sensitive speakers like the Tecton and Triangle, Klipsch, and so on. And if you like analog, which I do, I also played the TIAC X10 reel-to-reel that I have, and the all-new well-tempered Amadeus Junior turntable equipped with the new Charisma Audio moving coil Eco cartridge. Oh boy. So the DAC is a great DAC, don't get me wrong. It's probably one of the most analog sounding DACs out there. But there's certain qualities about analog that brings shiver down my spine. Now, if you're not a fan of turntables or analog, I get it, but that's just me. I love analog. Digital is great for convenience factor and all that stuff, and still sounds incredibly good, especially the DAC here. But there's certain qualities about analog that I just don't know what it is. The mid-range sounds like a little bit more warmer, vocals are sweeter, but there's a certain quality that brings a shiver down my spine. And it's not like I heard a Line Magnetic for the first time. I heard it with other sources, but with the turntable and the reel-to-reel, it just sounds so good. Just so good. It connects to me more emotionally. With tube amplifiers, I just find that it's a very good combination with analog gear, like a turntable or reel-to-reel. Gives you the full experience, at least for me. Now this is the Aerosmith Greatest Hits. Dream on, dream on, dream on. Anyways, beautiful. It's not the most well recorded, don't get me wrong, but it's, even though it's not well recorded, it sounds great on LP. Sounds great on the analog gear with the Line Magnetic or the Willsenton because it smooths it out. It's not like there's detail loss. The details are there, but it just gets my foot tapping. It's just smooth and enjoyable and warm and liquid without fatigue. That's just amazing to me because I enjoy this music and I can still enjoy it even though it's not as well recorded. And I know that a lot of us have music like that. It's not the best recorded, but you still enjoy it. And that's why I like analog. Now with that being said, you can't go wrong with the Line Magnetic or the Willsenton, but the question still remains, is the Line Magnetic better in terms of sound? And as I've alluded to and kind of told you right off the bat in the beginning of the video, the sound differences are not that big. If you go back and watch my Willsenton R800i review, I can say the exact same thing about the Line Magnetic and say, it's great, smooth, soundstage open, easy to listen to, great dynamics for a tube amplifier. I can say all those things that I said about the Line Magnetic, about the Willsenton. I'm getting confused. But the only key differences, and I'm really magnifying things here because that's my job, the Light Magnetic is slightly more refined on the top frequency and the mid ranges. That's about it. And we are talking about with stock tubes to avoid any confusion, because I did use upgraded tubes back and forth, and both have about the same effect. So again, we're just talking about strictly stock to avoid confusion. And I love both the Light Magnetic and the Willsenton because of the fact that they concentrate on stuff that tubes are good at, like sound staging, holographicness, three-dimensionality, musical connection, warmth, soundstage. That's the big thing. Soundstage, the holographicness. It sounds so large, spacious. That's what it's good at. Unlike some of the newer tube amplifiers that concentrate on detail, resolution, dynamics, how much detail, how much extension in the high frequency. To me, that is not such a good thing, because when I buy a tube amplifier, like I said, I want a tube amplifier sound. If I wanted resolution and detail and stuff like that for the same money, I would buy the NAD-C298, which I love for a completely different reason to why I love the Light Magnetic or the Willsenton. The caveat is, obviously, if you don't enjoy a warmer sound, if you enjoy a brighter sound, more detailed, more accurate, then the NAD-C298 will appeal to you more than either of these two amplifiers. So if this sound signature is not for you, of course it's going to be a caveat. You don't like that kind of sound. I'm not too worried about the bass being slow or lumpy. Like I mentioned, the bass is pretty adequate on both units. But again, it's not going to be the fastest bass you've heard, like a solid state amplifier, like a very good solid state amplifier with very fast lightning bass. It's not going to be that. So if you're looking for that, this is not it. And that's going to be a caveat for you. Other than that, you're going to have to change the tubes every 3 to 5 years. That's about what most people use. And that's not such a bad thing, because that comes with owning any tube amplifier. But that is something that you have to consider, and it is a caveat because it is extra money out of your pocket regardless. It's extra maintenance. Another thing that comes with naturally owning a tube amplifier is you have to bias it. Now, some tube amplifiers, the newer ones these days, do have auto biasing, which you don't have to touch at all because they just bias it for you. But this one, you can do it manually, at least on top of the unit, very easily. Before, the older tube amplifiers, some of them you would have to open it up every time you have to bias it. And you want to do this, biasing thing once in a while, maybe once a month or something like that, to make sure the tubes burn evenly so that you don't get a channel imbalance or one tube goes before the other one and so on. So it is extra maintenance that comes naturally with owning any tube amplifier that doesn't have auto biasing. So that could be a caveat. And lastly, if you are in a very large room and dependent on what kind of speakers you have, these are not going to drive every speakers out there. There's still 48 watts per channel. And yes, it is a tube watt, so it's going to seem more powerful than a solid state, 48 watt per channel amplifier for sure. And it will drive most speakers in small to medium and even large size rooms, depending on how sensitive your speakers are. So mostly, for the most part, this is going to be good for speakers that are sensitive to mid-level sensitive. Easy-ish to drive. Not the hard to drive speakers like the Magnepan, for example, in my opinion. It's just not going to be a good match for something like that, in a big room especially. So that's it from me. Thank you for watching. If this video was helpful to you, consider giving it a like, a thumbs up, because it does help us a lot and it doesn't cost you anything. And also consider joining our Patreon to keep us independent and keep these unbiased reviews going. Until next time.